been nothing like it in history. For a market to do the same thing 2 times is fairly rare in a row. 3 times is very unusual. 19? If anybody looked at that, they would say, oh my gosh. And I talk about it every day.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Inside the Markets, presented by StockPulse.com. I'm your new host, Justin O'Connell, and we're sitting down today with Bill Murphy. He is the chairman of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA, as well as the proprietor at LeMetropolCafe.com. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us today.
Great to be here, Justin. Thanks for having me.
So the Fed recently announced a potential tapering. What's your read on that, and what could the effects thereof be?
Well, I'm prejudiced, of course, but I've been going through this the entire year. They've had after every Fed meeting, gold has been slaughtered. It doesn't matter what they say. They can talk about interest rates going up in 2023. It's all forgotten the next day. Every single time, gold this year has been slaughtered. Today, they did it a little differently. They took gold down $30 ahead of the meeting. That's with the dollar lower, interest rates doing nothing, the NASDAQ at the all-time highs. It's what they do every single time. And in the end, it doesn't mean a thing. But the gold and silver markets right now are all about what I call the Gold Cartel, suppressing the price of gold and silver for their own means. And we'll get into that. But that's what they've been doing for a long time. But I've never seen anything like what they've done this year.
The Fed announced on Wednesday plans to begin slowing its aggressive bond buying program by $15 billion a month in mid-November. The first step that policymakers will take in reversing a historic level of stimulus for the U.S. economy amid a recent inflation surge. Now, I wonder how much of this is actually a slowing of, I guess, stimulus or welfare, whether it be corporate or otherwise, and really just kind of a reallocation. However, I'm curious. So what's your read on what this should mean for the US dollar and therefore kind of the economic structure of the world?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, today there hasn't been any reaction. There was nothing going into it. The only thing they've really done is, again, you've got the stock market at all-time highs. You've got gold and silver is the one they've punished all year. And even today, they said they did it early. Yesterday was ridiculous what they did to silver. I call it the silver signal, which means they hit silver ahead of time to really alert people that they're going to kill the dollar, the gold the next day. And that's exactly what they did today. The dollar is a little bit lower today. Didn't have anything to do with the gold price at all. And yes, a weaker dollar would be bullish for gold, but I mean, there's no reason that gold and silver can't soar without it, quite frankly. It's just what they've done this year, again, is like I said earlier, I've never seen anything like it. Nearly every single day this year, outside of maybe 20, they have bombed the price of gold or silver. And I mean straight down in the morning, 2 hours before the COMEX opened in New York and to 2 hours afterwards, every single day.
We see that gold prices were unfazed after ADP reports 570,000 job gains in October. What do you feel about the overall economy right now? So in the wake of 2020 with the lockdowns and the subsequent stimulus as well, where are we at, do you think, in a macro sense?
Well, if I may, it's a bit scary. I mean, in the sense of if you look about the money that's been printed, you look about the debt, you look about U.S. deficits, and it's not reflected. Of course, they're trying to deny all that, but what they do to the prices of gold and silver is gold is looked at the barometer of U.S. Financial market health, and that's according to Paul Volcker, the former Fed chairman. So, but boy, I mean, when you think about how the stock market keeps making new highs no matter what happens, I mean, it's all-time high, after all-time high, 40 to 60 times this year. It never stops. And things could change very quickly. I'm not in that particular business because I believe gold and silver are the most underpriced assets in the history of ever. And one day they're going to explode when I call the bad guys, the Gold Cartel, runs out of enough physical supply to foster these bombing raids they do in the paper market every day.
Can you speak a little bit more on silver being so undervalued? It's in the low 20s still. And there is this, I've spoken with other experts as well. And this concept of silver being one, if not the most undervalued asset in the world or commodity at least, is something that a lot of people postulate. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I can say I've been wrong for 5 or 6 years because I thought silver was going to start making a move towards 100 years ago. I think I can understand it because of what the cartels, I call them, the cabal, the gold cartel, they've just been desperate. And because gold's the key, but they realized years ago they had to manipulate silver so it didn't affect what they were doing in gold. And then they got carried away in silver like I've never seen before. I think it has to do with J.P. Morgan, who was fined $920 million a year ago for rigging the gold and silver markets. And if I may, I think it goes back to many years ago when silver was first made its move, made its second move to 50 in 2011. It went from like 17 to 50 and then like the first day of May in 2011. It pretty much went straight up. And the open interest, which is the longs and shorts on the COMEX, was like 135,000 contracts, pretty low, all the way up to the very end. Then it started to build and build. And I believe that J.P. Morgan bought all the physical silver they could, knowing what they were going to do at 50 to stop it. And they've stopped it now and made it go down for 10 years. And I think it's J.P. Morgan has been the one getting rid of physical silver to aid the selling process. And what they got on the way up, of course, they loaded up on the short side in the paper market at the end. So they made a fortune on this trade. And I think this is the tail end of it. When it's going to end, I don't know. I mean, every time it starts to turn around, it goes right back down again. You've had have a massive base this year between 22 and 30, 22 being pretty much the bottom. And at some place when it turns, it will be absolutely spectacular. But those of us who have been bullish over the years have had to put up with what J.P. Morgan and their allies have been doing, and it's ongoing.
In a report from Bloomberg Intelligence written by analyst Mike McGlone, he addresses industrial metal prices, precious metals prices as well. He writes, quote, silver has been a top metal underperformer of 2021, notably for failing to follow copper, which leads us to expect 2022's metals story may be about gold. If copper and aluminum revert from about decade highs, gold should have a greater potential to rise with bond prices. Copper basically needs to sustain above 10,000 a ton as we see it, or gold is poised to steal the show in 2022. He continues on gold. Gold in 2021 is holding above the key pivot from 2011 to 2012 at about 1,700 an ounce. We see little stop the resumption of the extended trajectory for this traditional store of value to keep appreciating in terms of fiat currencies with unlimited supply and attachment to economies with rapidly rising debt to GDP. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, and again, gold's the most, and silver first, but gold is so undervalued. I mean, look what the cryptos have done this year. It's ridiculous, and yet they've suppressed the gold and silver prices. And the success of the cryptos, and I salute these people, has hurt gold and silver because you can be in anything this year but gold and silver and make money. Now, again, that's where my money is. So I'm as happy as unhappy as anybody. And that's going to change dramatically when this suppression and manipulation runs to its end game. And it will be spectacular. And who knows what gold and silver will do on the upside, but it will be very dramatic once this nightmare ends. And that's what I do, is report on it every day and try to keep people in the game, because they suppress gold and silver so much relative to outside market fundamentals and these other markets that people are quitting left and right. It's made it very, very difficult, and that's why they're doing it. And it's worked this year so far. Again, I can't stress it enough. If people ever go back and check out what I'm saying, almost every day outside of 20 this whole year, bombing raids in the morning. And I mean straight down in the hours before COMEX open and afterwards. And it's just demoralized people.
You mentioned cryptos, and I think it's important to delineate between Bitcoin and some of the altcoins. In their name, they are defined in relation to Bitcoin. These include coins such as Dogecoin, for instance, around which there was a lot of hype, an infinite supply of Dogecoins, and essentially a dump on the news, which was Elon Musk's Saturday Night Live appearance. It was textbook. In some ways, I guess, market action at the very least. But then there's Bitcoin, and Bitcoin in some ways took inspiration from gold. There's a finite supply. And in that report from Bloomberg, McGlone wrote, one major obstacle for gold is that Bitcoin is continuing to hurt its appeal. Quote, Bitcoin may be doing to gold what the metal did to silver. We believe gold positions appear increasingly naked if not paired with Bitcoin, if only for the discipline of diversification and notably for a potential paradigm shift in money. What are your thoughts on his statements, but also the impact you've seen of Bitcoin on the gold market, if any?
Well, it's a great story. And again, it's been the greatest investment in the history of mankind. I was involved, or could have been involved, with when it was at 100, not 63,000. But I was at a conference with Jeff Berwick in Acapulco. It was a crypto gold conference. And crypto was just getting some notoriety. And the crypto guys at the conference were all excited because the Bitcoin price got to 1240, which that day was the same price of gold. And I was disgusted back then. This was like February 2017. 1240 to 63,000. I mean, it's like a whole different world, different dream. And all I can do is salute those people. You know, I did not get involved as I could have, and I paid for it. But I think that what is coming in gold and silver, which again, they're at these lowly prices because of the manipulation and suppression, or they should have soared like the cryptos have. At some point, they're going to run out of ammo, and gold and silver are going to go bananas. And I can't tell you when, because anyone who's tried to pick that day has been wrong so far. But it's coming, and that's where my money is.
And have you seen an impact by Bitcoin on gold or perhaps silver?
Well, I mean, you can't help it. I mean, I don't know what Bitcoin was in the first year, 25,000? I mean, 63,000? I mean, it's just like a different species. I mean, it's so good. So, I mean, again, I just respect all the people in it. And yes, it's hurt. The paper bombings by the Gold Cartels, I call it, have destroyed physical demand in the West, along with the crypto surges. You combine it all together. I mean, look at today. Last time I looked, gold was rallying, was still down 15, 17 bucks. It's been this way all year. And it's been very difficult to be honest with people about what's going on, but that's what I do, and I have to deal with it.
There is a competition between Bitcoin and gold, and it's stoked by the likes of Peter Schiff and Anthony Popliano and some others. In fact, I actually recently spoke to Andy Hoffman, who contends over and over again that Bitcoin killed gold and silver. So I'm curious, you obviously are very friendly to gold, or I'm sorry, to Bitcoin. There are a ton of ideological parallels. So many gold bugs became the earliest of Bitcoiners. I remember Trace Mayer, who ran runtogold.com, was.
Pardon me if I may interrupt there. Exactly. We had a conference in Washington in 2008, and that's how far back Trace was involved in getting people interested in the cryptocurrencies. He's a terrific guy.
So the overlap, particularly with Bitcoin, is undeniable. And so, but there is this competition, and I'm curious to see what do you make of this kind of concept that Bitcoin and gold are competitors or enemies?
Well, they are. And I've known Andy Hoffman a long time, and he was smart enough to get involved early himself. But what's killed gold and silver hasn't been the cryptos. He's dead wrong there. It's hurt them. And what's killed them is the gold cartel suppressing the price. And it's just gotten people unnerved because they keep getting bombed. That's what I do that every day. I've been on this case for 23 years, and I knew Andy when he first got started, but I think I know what I'm talking about on this one.
Okay, so David Megger, director of metals trading at High Ridge Futures, recently said on inflation and the impact it could have on gold, quote, we see undertones of support coming from the general idea that inflationary pressures are going to be enough to hold gold up in the midst of an environment where we see the Federal Reserve slowly moving towards reducing asset purchases. So I'm curious, What's your read on inflationary pressures, stagflationary pressures, deflationary pressures? And have you ever seen anything like this before in the United States?
Well, if I may again, nothing matters except the gold price suppression scheme and that being overcome. Nothing. Look at this year. You can't have gold's supposed to be a hedge against inflation. Gold's gone down $150 this year. What kind of hedge is that? It's just because of what they're doing to it, and they're making it that way. As I said earlier, the debts, the deficits, everything you can think of, gold and silver should be flying, if ever in history, and that's coming. All I can say is they put it off, and these bombing raids I keep talking about have made it so obvious that people are saying, "No, I don't want to get involved in that." It will change, and it's coming, but I can't tell you when.
I want to remind everyone.
Pardon me. Hopefully, it's going to be sooner rather than later. There's a couple things that might influence that, but we'll see.
I want to remind everyone to head on over to stockpulse.com and lemetropolcafe.com, Bill's site. So what do you think those couple things could be that could change things that you mentioned?
Well, it's still up in the air. There's some people that talk about a reset, and the bad guys, as I call them, are bombing it every day to get people out so they can cover their shorts. You've got what they call this Basel III development over in Europe, in which the Bank for International Settlements is changing some of the rules to get people out of unallocated gold and make it more expensive and into allocated gold, which means for your viewership, the dealers have to have the gold or silver they're selling versus just putting it all in, lumping it in one account. And that goes into effect in the Bank of England on the first of the year. It went into effect June 28th elsewhere, but it didn't mean a thing. It was a total dud. That could come into effect. And then there's some talk about the Chinese doing a digital gold currency around their Beijing Olympics. So there's some reason to think that early next year, the end of this year, this nonsense of bombing the gold market and silver markets every day is going to end, and it could explode. And if it goes, it could go again. I can't stress this enough. It could explode dramatically.
For those who don't know, Basel III is an internationally agreed set of measures developed by the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision in response to the financial crisis of 2007 to 2009. The measures aim to strengthen the regulation, supervision, and risk management of banks. So can you elaborate a little bit on what you think the impact thereof will be overall on the gold market?
Well, theoretically, as I just mentioned, it should be very bullish in the fact that dealership, if they're going to take an order, for example, years ago, Morgan Stanley got fined because of what they were doing in silver, that they were taking orders of silver and putting it in unallocated accounts. They were charging, and they were using the same silver for different clients. So if they said, yes, you have X amount of ounces and dollars of silver in your account, they used the same silver for all these people's accounts. Well, now, under this new agreement, many of the banks they have to, and the bullion dealers, they have to put the gold and silver in an allocated account, which means specific to one group or individual. Now, they don't have to do that, as I understand it, but it will make their expenses go way, way up if they do not. So we'll see what kind of effect that has. So far, it's been a dud. But if that goes into play, it could change the game.
What do you make of those who claim that the incidences on Wall Street, particularly with JP Morgan, of traders being caught, I guess, manipulating the markets, and particularly silver, are nothing more than isolated incidents?
Nothing else matters to the whole gold and silver market. It's what the gold and silver markets are all about. At least that's the way I see it. And I've been doing this for 23 years. There's times when they're more aggressive and less aggressive and so on. But isolated incidents you got to be clueless if you really follow the gold and silver markets and watch the price action. Again, all people have to do is go back to the beginning of the year and look at what gold and silver have done in the mornings almost every day this year. It's the most obvious thing in the history of mankind. And they've been, $920 million is not the slightest fine in the world. And a bunch of the bullion dealers have been fined in the same way. And it's difficult because I've been down to visit with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, a couple of times. I've been to Washington a few times to deal with Congress. They don't do anything. The CFTC is part of the problem. They talked about tampering down or taping down, whatever you want to call it, the silver market in February when the Reddit crowd was trying to squeeze it. They didn't do that to GameStop or AMC or any of these other things. No, silver can't go above 30. That would be bad for the market. They were caught talking like that. The CFTC commissioner. It's so bad. It's an abomination, and that's the way it is.
There's lots of talk about that the setup in gold and silver is particularly silver is reminiscent of in the 70s from the 75 to 81 period before the silver price increased upwards of $50. So I'm curious, are you seeing similar parallels between what's going on in the silver and gold prices now than what compared to what we were seeing back in the mid 70s, the end of the 70s? And do you have any anecdotes about that time?
Well, I have met some of the Hunts here in Dallas, Texas, where I live. They're very nice people. I was involved in the commodity markets way back in with this famous hedge fund manager, Ray Dalio, who's the biggest hedge fund manager in the world. And I followed it, Jim Sinclair. I knew his broker was a friend of mine and back then, and I was involved in gold and silver, and I was involved with Ray and some other people in cattle and feeder cattle and pork bellies and stuff like that. But do I see it reminiscent? Absolutely, for different reasons. This time it's because so far inflation's been nothing, even though it's there, but the bad guys won't let it go. It all has to do with they're running out of enough physical supply to facilitate their paper bombings of the markets. That's coming, and when that happens, gold and silver are going to go bonkers to the upside, and it will be very, very dramatic.
Well, how dramatic will it be? Will essentially the whole world take notice and then all of a sudden gold and silver are money again in the popular imagination? Or
no, yes, you're right. I mean, I've been looking for silver to go to $100 for years, and when you think it was at 50, 40, 30, 40 years ago, big deal. There's a lot of people that I know that I have a high respect for that are looking for much, much higher prices. I'll be a very happy camper at $100 silver, but yes, it could go much higher. And I mean, gold at 3,000 would be cheap.
can you speak to the emotional side of silver investing? We see on forums online the enthusiasm for silver coins. eBay has a robust market in silver. Reddit has robust silver communities. So does Facebook. And there's no denying the appeal of holding gold and silver in your hand. And in addition, the role it's played in our folklore in the US in particular. So on a note other than folklore, perhaps there in the Constitution is enumerated that there would be a bimetallic standard. In our pop culture, in Wizard of Oz, there's it's a thought of a parable of the gold story or the gold standard. And then also take us to the modern day where there's been some pretty dramatic shifts in gold policy from going off the partial gold standard of the Bretton Woods and to gold being made legal again for Americans to own. So can you speak perhaps to kind of the emotional side of these markets, starting with silver and otherwise?
Well, you know, and I know some of the people you're talking about, and again, I have the highest regards for them. I was just did a part of a conference from my friend Chris Marcus. He calls it Silverfest, had a bunch of quality people on it. He ran it out of Mexico. And all I can say is, I mean, I've been very wrong these past few years. I didn't think that they could continue doing what they're doing to silver, you know, through 2022, and they have. But I'm a big follower of Newton's law of equal and opposite reactions. This has been so bad for so long that it'll be that good. And that's what I see coming. And right now, the negativity is perverse, I mean, or pervasive, because it's just, again, every day they bomb the market. And in here, you know, every time Fed speaks, you get all-time highs in other markets, and gold and silver go down no matter what. Again, it said this morning even they took gold down nearly $30. The dollar was lower. The interest rates hardly changed. The NASDAQ was in all-time high ground. It's just what they do over and over again. And that has to end, and it will. And when it does, watch out.
What do you make of the current supply chain crunch, reports of grocery shelves being empty, and then how does that support your thesis on the gold front?
Well, so I guess I would say to me it's not too much related because if I may, that nothing matters in the gold silver market except what quote they do. You know, the bullion banks, the U.S. government, other central banks, the BIS, what they do to suppress the price. Nothing has mattered fundamentally all year for gold and silver. And otherwise you wouldn't be seeing this kind of price action. So to me, none of this matters except to when they will run out of enough supply and they can't go on anymore. And then again, as I keep saying, watch out above.
Can you speak to some of the fundamentals that you're seeing, if you haven't already, on the gold front? Do you look at any technicals in your analysis?
I got to be a little bit boorish here. But no, well, I used to look at all the fundamentals and the technicals. They don't mean a thing. Nothing matters except what the bad guys can get away with. You've seen it time and time again this year. Gold this year has made 6 times tried to rally and made lower highs. Basically, if you look at a chart, 6 times. The fundamentals didn't mean a thing. And as soon as the technicals look good, the bad guys come in and hit it hard. So I'm, again, a one-trick pony or something like that in the sense of I think that's what I believe in, that this is going to blow up and it's when the bad guys blow up.
Have you seen an evolution in the, view of silver investment over the years dating back to the 80s? Do you see diminishing interest? Do you see robust interest?
Terrible this year because of what they've done. That's what they, again, have created. The people that have been in it a long time and have followed it and are watching other assets make all-time highs, housing prices, you have different commodities during the year, lumber, copper, oil, and all got hit today, but they've all gone way, way up. Silver is like a dead horse. It doesn't do anything. It's just blah. And people are quitting. And I think that's what the JP Morgan crowd wants them to do. And it's worked. Do I think it's going to change dramatically, like I keep saying? Absolutely. But it's hard to say when because every day we go through the same drills.
I've heard repeated stories about asteroids with lots of precious metals on them, which could dampen the gold and silver market. For instance, in interesting engineering this morning, new calculations show that one of 2 metal abundant asteroids traveling near Earth may contain precious metal worth approximately 11.65 trillion, a report from CNET explains. That means that the space rock likely contains more iron, nickel, and cobalt than the Earth's entire global metal reserves. And gold and silver is amongst those metals. So what do you say to people who suggest that the entire gold market could be undermined by simple asteroid mining?
Undermining would be an understatement. I mean, I have to laugh because, even though we always talk about conspiracy theories these days, and, when my colleague says, and he's right, what the gold antitrust action aid deals with is conspiracy fact. And conspiracies are nothing unusual. I mean, the antitrust laws were put in place in the U.S., Gold Antitrust Action Committee, because big companies conspired to rig prices. That's why you have the antitrust laws. And so when I hear something like this, I mean, I have to deal with enough when it comes to, people looking at us cross-eyed at times. But then I hear something like that, and I feel pretty traditional in terms of what God has to say. I mean, anything can happen, but that would take a long time, I think, to manifest itself.
I wonder what the price of gold would have to be to make mining asteroids worth it, and what that price point would be. So antitrust laws, can you maybe, for those who don't know what those are, explain what they are and explain what got you interested in them and that whole experience? I mean, on sitting as a trader, sitting in the markets and getting kind of a firsthand view of how these things function.
Well, simplistically put, I mean, I was a commodity trader for many, many years and all kinds of markets, and especially copper and, as I said, grains and livestock. And I decided in 1998 to go on out and write about the gold silver markets because I saw how the internet was coming along and it was going to grow. And I thought I could, with my background, give adequate commentary and build a business. And so I started writing about gold and silver. And after about 2 to 3 weeks, this big hedge fund, which I was sure I was working with a guy named Frank Venerosa, who's a legend in the industry, and he wrote something called the Gold Book, and that he had heard from the Bank of England and knew that the bullion banks had leased out something like up to 8,000 tons of their gold, and nobody knew that. Then this hedge fund blew up long-term capital management in September 1998, and all of a sudden the price of gold was going to 300, pushing down, $300, push it down, $300, push it down. And I checked around, I realized it was the bullion banks stopping the price of gold from going up. And then I realized it was because they were short. They loaned out all this gold. And so if the gold price went from 300, say to 350, 400, 450, they could lose fortunes. So they got together and made sure the price of gold stayed below $300. And so I started complaining about it in my daily commentary. I said, this is rigged. And a colleague, our goddess secretary treasurer, followed me, a subscriber. And he says, I'm tired of you complaining about it. Let's do something about it. So we formed the Gold Antitrust Action Committee because we realized that, in fact, these bullion banks were violating antitrust laws. So in sense of rigging the price. And that's how we got started. We formed GATA in early of 1999, and we've been at it for going to be 23 years soon.
And just one more time, I want to remind everyone to head over to stockpulse.com and lemetropolcafe.com, where you can find Bill's work. Bill, can you speak about the heyday of GATA, if you will, until that day comes again, of course? But I think that a lot of the precious metals analysts from the period of about 2009 and 2012, if you will, Gold's top, were sort of rock stars in a way. You were a rock star in ways you probably hadn't been since your Patriot days. So can you speak to that period?
Well, I can say this. The GATA's had 4 international conferences. We started off in Durban, South Africa. We had one up in the Yukon, 2005, 2008 in Washington. And the final one, which was a mega one, was in London in August of 2011. And met so many great people. And it was very exciting in August of 2011 because gold was breaking through 1650 to 1900, and silver had already reached $50 an ounce again. And the shares were flying. The HUI was above 600 back then, and everybody wanted to be involved in gold, silver, and get involved in the action. And of course, the last 10 years, quite frankly, have been terrible. You got silver at 23 and gold at 1765 and the HUI at 250, 260. It's like, what the heck? So it's been a tough go, and it will change, and the heyday will come back again. And I think, well, I can't speak for my colleague, but I hope to have one final conference in which we can all celebrate.
I was speaking with Gregory Manarino, and he mentioned that the markets are in la la land. Does that sound as an approximation for how things are currently?
Well, Greg's a smart guy, and I understand where he's coming from. 40 to 60 times this year. The major indexes make all-time highs in our stock market. No matter what happens, one of the major indexes is usually up on the day. And I call it, I haven't mentioned yet, the plunge protection team, which the working group in financial markets has, and so on, that the government can come in and just get their banks and their own money operation and just goose the stock market to the upside when they want to. And for people that are short, have been slaughtered by it. And I haven't done that, thank goodness, but that's what's going on. And I could see why he would say that.
If you had like 5 minutes with somebody to outline the case for gold and silver manipulation, what experiences would you draw on? Which egregious cases would you allude to while you're making this argument to somebody?
Well, it's my colleague, so many of them, where do you start? Two of the ones that come right at the top of my head was what got the legendary James Turk gold money to support God over 20 years ago, when the Bank of England announced in advance they were going to sell half their gold in advance at the early May of 1999. I mean, who does that if you want to get the best price? Gold went down for the next 2 years. It didn't do anything. I mean, people went from 300, 250, 300, 250. That brought a lot of people into the God of Kim. He said, this is not what people would be doing. That was done to help suppress the price, along with what the bullion banks were trying to do to keep their short positions from blowing up because of long-term capital management. And then this year, there's been nothing like it. I can't stress this enough. Nothing like it in history with the daily bombings, 2 hours before the opening on the COMEX to 2 hours afterwards, straight down, straight down, straight down. In September alone, 19 straight days, every day. And all you have to do is look at the charts. I mean, people aren't going to do that, but that's what I do. I follow it every day. There's been nothing like it in history. For a market to do the same thing 2 times is fairly rare in a row. 3 times is very unusual. 19 every day, but 20 of the whole year. If anybody looked at that, they would say, oh my gosh. And I talk about it every day.
What's commitment of traders looking like currently?
Nah, in silver, they've made silver such a rinky-dink market that people have left the silver market. There's about 143,000 contracts in open interest. They're still going after the gold market in a big way with the sell side. It comes and goes, but it hasn't meant much like it used to. I mean, they just gold rallies, and the bad guys, as I call them, sell it. And same with silver. But silver, there's not much interest because the specs have left the arena. So it's not as significant as it was in years past.
You say silver is a rinky-dink market.
Well, they made it rinky-dink. Now, I mean, I got a lot of my money in it, in the shares and physical silver itself. So, I mean, I don't think it's free. They're trying to make it that way. And if you look at the price action this year, is what I'm talking about. It's the worst acting market I've ever seen in my life relative to other markets and outside market fundamentals. I mean, at 23, we're complaining when it was at 26.
True story. So tell me more about it as a rinky-dink market. Do you think there's an opportunity for like another cornering of the silver market scenario to play out?
Oh, it could happen so easily. I mean, 1 or 2 major investors could scoff up the silver market like that with the money that's been created. I think what they did to the Hunts many years ago, they said they were really good people. It just has people scared because it's just like what the Reddit crowd and Wall Street silver crowd did in silver when it was at 27, 28. They went to squeeze it, and the CFT said, no, we're not going to allow this to happen. So there's history that if you go after the silver market, you're going to get in trouble with the U.S. government. That's just fact. So people shy away from it. Again, the key was going to be when they run out of enough physical supply. I keep saying it because that is the key to why silver is going to go, whoop, 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 whoop. But we're not there yet.
The Hunt brothers have not the greatest reputation, especially amongst younger, I guess, silver bugs. So could you kind of explain what you mean by that they are great people?
Well, I go to the gym, work out here in Dallas with some of them. I know them. I met, the Hunts. Lamar Hunt, and they're very nice people. What the government did back then, they changed the rules of the game. They were buying silver all the way on their way up towards 50, and then they said you can't buy anymore. I mean, you can't buy any more GameStop, AMC. You can't buy anymore, or you can't sell anymore. I mean, they changed the rules, and you could only liquidate. And so then they got, the bigger money around to go get on the short side and bury them. It wasn't their fault. They were just, doing what they thought was correct in a free market. The government at the time made it an unfree market, the CFTC. And horrible what they did.
What would it take to make Bill Murphy a Bitcoiner?
I blew it. I mean, I had my chance when you mentioned Trace Meyer and some of these guys. When it was at 1240 at that conference, when it was at 100, much less 1240, I could have paid attention to it. I didn't do it. It's the way life is at times. I mean, I've got my money in gold, silver, and then gold, silver shares, and I expect to go, sail off into the sunset with a big major league win. I missed the Bitcoin move. I wouldn't get out of gold and silver to get into them as much as respect I have for the people in it for anything.
So on the gold and silver front, again, I'm curious, particularly with silver, like what are you keeping an eye on day to day to really kind of get across to people what's going on in these markets? Anything other than just the daily price action, the 19 days in a row? Have you seen anything like that before? Is there anything else?
No, because I've never seen anything like it. So again, I used to follow fundamentals, like crazy. I mean, that's what I would dig into every fundamental I could and see who was right. And I know a lot of smart guys, like I said, like Ray Dalio, the Frank Veneroso, the guy who got me started in the business. Dan Ritchie was the chancellor, the head of the University of Denver, the whole university. Brilliant guy, and I'd follow their fundamentals and what they had to say and what I've learned since then. But I've learned in the past number of years that the fundamentals of gold and silver don't mean anything. At least, pardon me, it's my own opinion. But so I'm only looking at the price action to tell me when things have changed. I mean, yesterday was a joke. He had silver down 70 cents for no reason. But a lot of times they take silver down before they're going to hit gold. And sure enough, what I call it the silver signal, they had the silver signal flashing yesterday, and this morning they took gold down $30 after the COMEX opening for no reason. Dollar was slightly lower, nothing, interest rates, nothing, just boom, right.
I just want to remind everyone to head on over to stockpulse.com. We're sitting down today with Bill Murphy, the chairman of GATA, as well as proprietor at LeMetropoleCafe.com. We're coming up on year's end now. So I'm curious, what's been the most insane stories of 2021 in your view?
Well, again, you can't top the bombs away story. I was just at a conference in New Orleans, and they asked me 2 months ahead of time what my title would be, and that can be difficult because so much can change in 2 months. And you're gonna make a presentation, and they want to know what the title is going to be 2 months ahead of time. At this time, normally I would be very hesitant to give a title way in advance. This time I didn't have to think because of what happened every day almost of the whole year. I said it's bombs away, and sure enough, that's the way it's been and still is as of this week. So it's so unusual. I can't stress that enough.
Are there any general economic stories you've seen this year that took you off guard or caught you by surprise?
No, what's just got me not surprised because it's going on so much is the same thing. I mean, I didn't think it would go on this long. I mean, it never ends. It's like a bad dream. And excuse me, it just keeps happening over and over again. And I'm hoping that what we talked about at the end of the year, the beginning of next year, is going to lead to a game changer. And all you can do is look at the price action and tell.
Do you have any?
Do we expect today to be bombed around Fed speak? Every time this year we've had Fed speak or Powell's made a comment from the Fed, they've taken gold and slaughtered it, and they come up with some goofy reason. Interest rate's going to go up in 2023. What? Then by a day or two later, no one's even talking about it. Yet every day they've had this thing, they've had gold slaughtered this year. Every single time, 4, 5, 6 times.
Any predictions for 2022?
Well, I've been way too early in gold and silver, but I'm just looking for silver to take out 30. And when it does this time, it should explode.
GATA, what's new at GATA?
Well, my colleague Chris Powell puts out emails every day, and people can sign him at www.gata.org. He does a great job. We've contacted the press. We send stuff to the press all the time. The press won't mention us. I was going to do an interview at Kitco. They called me, emailed me, said they'd like to do it at the New Orleans conference. So, then they said, send what's some of your topics. I said, I'll do more than that. I'll send my presentation. Give them a list of topics. few days before I was going to make the presentation, they said, we have to cancel you. I've never had that happen to me in my life. It was beyond rude. And I went and asked Michelle McCory, does a good job interviewing people there. I said, what happened? She said, well, I wanted to interview you. I don't know what happened. And that's the way it is. But my colleague Chris sends stuff to the press all the time. They won't even mention Scott's name. And that's worse than it was 20 years ago, or at least back then they would mention us. Now, no, they don't even make it known.
So Gada is now a victim of cancel culture.
You can put it that way. We've been canceled. Yeah, I know I was canceled to do my interview, and Chris Powell, my colleague, gets canceled what he sends the press all the time. And it's not even he said, she said it's not allowed. You're just not allowed to be mentioned. That's how bad it is.
Hiko canceled Gada. I'm curious, what's going on the lawsuit front? Is there anything on the regulatory legal side that you've been keeping an eye at?
No, I mean, I hate to use the word give up, but I mean, you know, I have friends of mine that we start off in a lawsuit. We gave our lawyer $50,000 and we didn't get anywhere. And so many of these lawsuits, they just run into the government interference and run into trouble. And it's difficult because the government's involved, and what they're doing, as my colleague Chris Powell says all the time, is legal. They're allowed to rig the gold and silver prices. They'll never talk about it, never mention it. It's legal. And the collusion with the bullion banks, I don't believe is legal at all. But it gets very complicated, and these lawsuits run into these same issues all the time and cost a fortune. And I salute the people doing it. I just was involved with some of it a long time ago and just didn't get anywhere.
Le Metropole Cafe, can you tell us what's going on there and what can your followers expect?
Well, people can sign up for a 2-week free trial. It's metropolecafe.com. And I've been doing it, as I said, for 23 years now. And like what I do this year has been tedious, as I keep talking about, because of what they're doing. But there's different people that contribute columns and some great thinkers out there. And I put them up, and I run a commentary during the week, 5 days a week, and continue at it. And again, this year has been pretty tough, but that's the way it is.
When you write that column, what are some of the news sources, information sources you visit first?
Well, I look and see what's going on in the markets, the price action, of course, and I'll go to Market Watch and Reuters and other producers of gold, silver material. They never get into, not rarely, they never get into the manipulation standpoint, or most of them don't. There's a few really good ones like Dave Kransler and Chris Marcus and so on. But so I just try to present what's going on from other people in the gold, silver markets and give my opinion every day and point out the things that I've learned throughout my career.
How about at a more macro level? Are there any information sources that you look at to get a read on what's being mined out of the ground, what demand's like on a global level as well?
I used to, but I don't anymore because it really doesn't matter. Life's short. I mean, an unfortunate story. I had a guy who was a lumber company executive, brilliant guy in the futures market, James McShirley, and he didn't get vaccinated and got COVID, and it killed him 2 weeks ago. And I had to go to his funeral. And I mean, I wanted to. And just a brilliant guy. I used to follow what he used to mention every day because there was nobody like him in terms of commentary. And so he would get into more of the details himself. And I just read whatever he wrote vociferously. And I miss that guy so much. And that's the way life goes. So we have to enjoy life while we can.
I'm sorry for your loss. Do you have any sort of advice for, everyone kind of on that theme about, enjoying life while you can?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I go to the gym all the time, and I'll be going to the gym after we finish our interview and do my commentary and just try to stay healthy. It's all you can do. I'm not the youngest guy in town anymore. So it's the way it is. And I just hope that I can sail off into the sunset with gold and silver flying and have a few smiles. I'm tired of the frowns.
We've had the honor and privilege of sitting down today with Bill Murphy, the chairman of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA, as well as proprietor at LeMaitre-Cafe.com. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us today.
Justin, great job. I really appreciate all you had to present.
And thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to head on over to StockPulse.com. Have a great day.